Work getting done or having little fun?
Yeah. A bit of both. A bit of both, Mr. Puri, but we're getting done with ish. Hey, there is the wrong way. There's the right way. Yeah. We're getting done, Mr. Puri. Yeah. We're getting done. Yes, yes. Chalo.
I had joined Krishna Consciousness in 1973, and within the same week, a young Jewish woman joined at our temple in Toronto in Canada. And it just so happened that within the next 2 years, she was kidnapped by what we call deprogrammers. And deprogrammers were kind of people who were oftentimes hired by the parents of students of Bhakti Yoga. And they believed that their child, of course she was like 20 years old, was a victim of brainwashing. So she was kidnapped, and this was all funded by deprogrammers, and her parents were behind it. And she was a young Jewish woman. And she was taken away from her place of choice, which was to be in the community of devotees. So our, let's say our benefactor, our mentor, his name was Jagadish at the time, he's one of our senior men, he asked Srila Prabhupada, what can we do about this? Some of our young people are being taken away, and it's a big controversial thing. What can we do about this? Some of our young people are being taken away forcibly. And so Srila Prabhupada made some kind of remark about that. He said that, well, if my students actually read my books, nothing will sway them. even if someone comes and forcibly takes them away and tries to alter their mind and their way of thinking and so on like that, then they will become very fixated on the philosophy, and what is true responsibility in life. They'll be very, very cemented in their purpose. And the purpose of life is a spiritual one. So it's just to get a grounding, to be very solid in Krishna consciousness. It comes through the philosophy, because intelligence has to be satisfied. Our senses want to be satisfied. Our mind wants to be satisfied. Our whole physicality wants to be satisfied. So all the different levels of what make up us can be nurtured in Krishna consciousness. So Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita that there's this lower self and there's this higher self. The lower self is the body and the senses and the mind. And the higher sense is the intelligence and ultimately the soul proper, the Atma, the individual's spark of life, which is what our true identity is. So if you can, all this combination is ruled by the higher self, and then the lower, everything else, all the senses and the mind can be controlled underneath, will start to behave and become subdued. So, by being connected and also always exposed to the philosophy, and Srila Prabhupada's take on the philosophy is, let's say, his particular direction in a devotional way, then we become very satisfied all around. And nobody can deny that the food is great. So senses will be satisfied. Everything within it's a culture that's being expressed here in the books. It's a culture that's being laid out. And but it kind of like starts from this scripture. Krishna is talking to Arjuna about giving the essentials, and therefore it's good to be acquainted with the essentials, the foundational principles of devotion. Divine is understood by devotees in Krishna consciousness. We're talking about the personality Sri Krishna. And Krishna is the speaker of Bhagavad Gita, and it is a philosophical text. It's really a book about psychology and how to overcome some of the problems of life. Great topics are found in the Bhagavad Gita, such as karma, time, what is the spirit all about, the living being, who is God, and Prakriti, material nature. There's 5 basic subject matters. And Shastri refers to, the books of words of wisdom. Wisdom has come along with the creation of human beings, and it's meant for our guidance. It's like a manual. Shastra or scripture is like a manual. Like the machinery is here. You got a human body, just like buying something from the store, a vacuum cleaner or whatever. And there's usually a manual that goes along with it, how to operate it. So the scripture is like a manual for the human being. This is the human being who can understand the higher values of life. And so what is required is to have a text to go along with it. So it's good to, have that, sharpen your intelligence through studying and looking and reviewing this information that's come down from the highest levels down to our level here. The brain is made up of different compartments, and it's really like a muscle, and everybody likes big muscles, okay? And so this muscle, when it gets activated and used, it'll stay firm, strong, activated, and when it's being utilized. So particularly on the analytical side, you have the Bhagavad Gita will, as Krishna lays out his beautiful immortal words to Arjuna, his friend and student, he talks about some analytical things, how the world is made up of, what it's made of. And then Krishna also speaks about some more heartfelt kind of things in the Gita, those things that have a lot more impactful meanings to the soul, for instance, like liberation from the soul. Everybody's got problems. Arjuna had a problem in the beginning stages of the Gita, and then Krishna, kind of like unfolds out how Arjuna can, through a step-by-step procedure, if he follows this certain pattern, Arjuna can overcome his difficulties, his challenges. And so we have an intelligence, so the way to sharpen it is by keeping it activated. And when you look at or review something like the message of the Gita, said, yep, that kind of makes sense, Instead of me wandering, speculating about how the world is, here is a very structured kind of way of looking at the world. And just like, say, for instance, if you have a knife and it's, you use it to cut your vegetables, to make your real nice veggie preparations, After a good usage of it, it tends to get a little dull, so then you have to sharpen it up a little bit. And so in the same way, being always connected with Shastra or the words of wisdom will keep you a little bit in line with, what one has to do. Well, Srila Prabhupada, as he's been honored with the title honorifically as Bhakti Vedanta. Vedanta, the Sanskrit term, it's a combination of two words. Anta means the conclusion. And then Veda, what precedes it, this word Vedanta, means wisdom, knowledge. So the end of all knowledge ultimately rests in devotion. If you want to actually realize what the Vedas have to say, these ancient books from India, then you have to somehow or other probe into acts of devotion. That means there's realized wisdom. When you assimilate the philosophy and you put it into action, and when there's like a heart connection, then we can call it bhakti. So it's Srila Prabhupada, who's, let's say, amplified it. He's like a living example of this truth. And like George Harrison used to say, the proof is in the pudding is in the eating. So if it's a real nice custard, you can only tell if you dig in, bite into it, swallow it. So it's Srila Prabhupada, you can put it to the test, just apply what's there in his illuminating purports, and you'll see that, yes, there is some devotion. I can understand devotion now. It's devotion is something that's to be found in the inner recesses of your very being. And Srila Prabhupada has been able to, exemplify that through his own life, and by digesting this philosophy himself and putting into full practice and showing us how it's done, and we can, gain some kind of realization from this, and just by putting it into practice. So why is Srila Prabhupada over so many other, let's say, scholars or writers? Because there are a lot of commentators on the Vedas, and particularly in the sciences of bhakti, yoga, particularly Bhagavad Gita, is because he has been successful in carrying the spirit of it. And the spirit is devotion and service to others, and particularly service with a divine cause. So put it to the test, you'll see what happens. Basically, I serve in the capacity as a governing body commissioner, that is GBC. I'm an administrator, more of an overseer of spiritual standards, particularly in Canada. And Canada is a unique place because it's the second place that Prabhupada invested some time, a large amount of time, after establishing himself in the USA. And so it's also I have some responsibilities in Miami. In addition to that, as a sannyasi, I travel around and I go to various festivals. I follow a festival route, partially in North America. I go to South Africa, I go to South America, and India, those main places. And then sporadically to a few other spots on the globe. And I stage dramas, I direct plays, I write them, and work with the youth. And we have a great time. You know, what's nice about it is we take whatever's in the books, Srila Prabhupada's books, and we try to take the page and put it onto the stage. And it's a great discipline, as well as we have lots of fun together. And it's a great educational experience, an adventure, even I would say. So that's what I do, and I do like to lead kirtan. I love to give classes in Krishna Consciousness, and to present it more. I think for me the main thrust is I like to promote the principle of Dharma, to be dutiful, and while our scriptures tell a lot about being, let's say, very devotional, being very reaching transcendence, that's the way to get there, is that there has to be duty that comes first. So I guess those are my main contributions. I like to walk. I'm a pilgrim. I'm known as the walking monk. I walked across Canada 4 times, and also Ireland, Israel, Guyana, Trinidad, the Fiji Islands, and Mauritius. I plan to walk the US in 2016. And why walking? Well, I'm trying to make a statement that we don't need all this animation. We don't need all this technology, which is in a way killing us. It can be utilized in a very positive way, but I think most people use technology in a way that's self-destructive. They don't have any control on it. So the human body is meant for walking, and the more we get into walking and making a meditative walk, we stand to, let's say, benefit from it. So as a sannyasi, I have full right to do that, to travel around, meet people, and encourage the culture of more walking, less squawking.
Looking everywhere. Are you here?
looking everywhere.
Gopal, Gopal, we're looking everywhere.
Gopal, Gopal, we're searching everywhere.
Gopal, Gopal,
We're searching everywhere.
Gopal, Gopal, we're searching everywhere.
Are you there?
Estás aquí, estás allá.
Córnale.
He comes, he's this. We're looking everywhere.
Wait! I think he's here! Oh, or maybe not.
We're looking